And good morning, Bill Hurst with you. And it's time now for the Clarion Connection Talk Show with Ron Wilshire. And Ron, we'll just hand it right over to you. Good morning.
Morning, Bill. Welcome to Clarion Connection. My guest today is Kerith Strano Taylor. She's a candidate for the Democratic nomination for the 5th Congressional District in Pennsylvania. And welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Just wanted to talk about your background a little bit. It's kind of interesting background. I saw in the resume that you actually started college at Penn State when you were 16.
I did. I'm a product of the Brookville Area School District, and it was a stellar public education, and I was able to graduate a year early. And I started at Du Bois Penn State and then went to main campus and graduated from there with my bachelor's degree in political science.
I understand that your career path could have taken off quite differently based on your high school courses.
It could have. My senior schedule before I decided to move on to college was a series of welding and metal fabrication classes. And my mother encouraged me to be a sculptor. That could have been an option, but I have no artistic talent. So in hindsight, one of my closest friends is a welder, and I would love to know how to do it. But I ended up going on to college and enjoyed it very much and was very fortunate to be able to go early.
And eventually you became an attorney?
I did. So I left Penn State at 20 and moved to Washington, D.C. And I worked there for 2 years doing various work in government affairs and went to law school. And I attended one of the most conservative law schools in the nation, which is George Mason University in Arlington, Virginia. And when it was time to graduate and decide what I wanted to do, I wanted to move home and I wanted to open my own law firm. I had worked as a law clerked for a really large firm in D.C. for a year, and I loved it, but it was a 70 or 80 hour a week job. That was the nature of the work, and everybody was on a partner track, and that's what your life was going to look like. And I had met the man I was going to marry, and I wanted to have a semblance of family, so we decided to move back to my hometown. So we came back to Brookville in 2001 and opened our law firm. We hung our shingle.
Oh, great. Now, in addition to practicing law, you're also president of the Brookville School Board?
I am. I was elected as president of the school board during the reorganization meeting in December. I've sat on the board for 2 years prior to this, and it's been a really amazing experience figuring out how to communicate, negotiate with 9 different mindsets, right? Everybody has a different idea of where they see public education going. And we have really worked very collaboratively together. We have a great administrative team. We have a great team of teachers. And it's about figuring out where you want your school to go, identifying it, and moving forward. So I'm very fortunate to be able to do that work.
So it sounds like it would be good preparation for the sprawling 5th Congressional District.
I'd like to think so. Since 2006, I've been very active in something called the Statewide Children's Roundtable, which for folks that don't work within the foster care system, they might not be familiar with the work, but one of our Supreme Court justices, Max Baer, when he took the bench, looked at the state of our dependency system and how we were taking care of our foster children and realized that our numbers were not great across the nation. So he created this roundtable initiative, which put people together on a local level. And then 2 people from that local level move to a regional level, and then 2 people from there meet at the state every year to figure out what was broken and how to fix it. And I've been sitting on that state roundtable now since 2006, and the work that we have done is absolutely amazing. We've shortened the appeal period down to less than 9 months for adoptions, where they used to take 2 to 3 years. So kids sat in limbo. They'd found their forever families, but the paperwork couldn't be finalized. So to be able to shorten that to 9 months, and it was by changing some rules, which we were able to do. And that's just one of the things that we did in the foster care system. We were a lot of concentration on keeping kids with their families when we can, keeping them with kin as opposed to being put in a stranger care. So that work, again, you're sitting in a room with 70 people, identifying what's broken and figuring out how to fix it. And it took us a few sessions to get past we do everything well, it's fine, there's nothing wrong. But once we really dug in and were honest about the state of Pennsylvania and the services we were providing our foster kids, we owned it and we started making changes. So there's my hand's been in a lot of pots. And I think it's amazing when you sit down with people that are all committed to a goal. And my personal belief is what's missing in Washington is we no longer seem to have a goal. It seems to be more about blaming the other side for all the things that are wrong, as opposed to identifying that we have American challenges that need to be fixed. I look out my window, I see hungry kids. I see kids that can't wait at bus stops because they don't have clothing warm enough to stand in this cold weather. And to me, those aren't Democratic issues. Those aren't Republican issues. They're American issues. And we owe it to the people of the 5th District and the nation to start figuring it out. So,
With your background on the school board, how do you think you can impact from the congressional U.S. level education? Because a lot of times it's, the state has control, but there's some federal impact too.
there is. And where we see the biggest impact that we see coming from the federal level is the regulation that we have of our schools. And while it is necessary, and I would never argue that we can just go fly by night, the amount of paperwork that is required that overlaps because different departments require different paperwork is unbelievable. In order to craft an individual education plan for a student requires 10, 12, 15 hours worth of work. And at any school you look to in this area, they have a significant roster of children that have IEPs, right? Whether it's a gifted IEP or it's just individualized education plan. Imagine the amount of work and the people that you need in a room. Often, they're all gathering the same information, but multiple reports need to be done. So, when I sat in on an IEP meeting on behalf of a client, so I wasn't there as a school board member, I was there as a client, and I'm watching the paper move. And they have no choice but to fill it out. They have no choice but to fill it out multiple times and send it to multiple different departments. And there were 6 people in the room, 6 administrators, that I know all had other work that was pressing to be done. Not to say that the IEP wasn't important, crucially important, but we got the work done in the hour we were in the room. I knew they were all walking out to have multiple hours to still do the work. Sometimes when you look at our federal government, you wonder if the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. And it's enormous, and that's the nature of it. But when you read, the Government Accountability Office does a report every year of government redundancies. And these are the things you can fix to save an enormous amount of money. And while in the past few years the administration has been working hard and ticking off at some of those things, there are some things only Congress can touch. And it's amazing to see how many silos exist. I know there are 5 different arms of different agencies and departments that regulate the same chemical. That makes you wonder, why do we have 5 different departments trying to do the same work? But it's enormous. So until you herd the cats and get everybody going in the same direction, it's not a wonder that that's where we are. So
how would a little lawyer lady from Brookville change things if you got to Washington?
I'll give you an example. So when our legal services was cut, and I know here in Clarion, your Laurel Legal Services, their budget's been cut. Well, our office completely disappeared in Brookville. And our legal services organization, mostly amongst all the other things they did, represented families that were going through custody disputes. So when that office closed, we were overrun with families with no attorneys coming in on custody issues. And as anybody can imagine, when people are trying to figure out where the kids are going to live, it is the most intense feeling most people will ever experience. So the first step in our custody litigation is a conference where you're expected to sit down and negotiate. Well, these folks came over and they didn't know what was expected of them, so they would end up standing in the hallway screaming at each other. Well, that didn't help our court system, and all these cases got pushed to the next level, and it really created a backlog. So my judge asked me if I would be willing to sit down with these folks and help conciliate their conferences before they went to the next mediation level. And when my judge asked me to do something, I said, yes, of course, Judge Forador, I'm happy to do that. So we started in June, and we have an 85% settlement rate. Because when people come in and sit down and you get them to own the fact that they love their kids more than they hate anything else, they want to talk. And they want to walk away with an agreement that they can live with. They want to know that they're going to be able to see their kids on Christmas. They want to know that their future is not going to be fighting about every step of the way. If I am able to help 85% of the people that don't have lawyers come up with an arrangement that they can live with, I believe that I am equipped to go help people find their goal and move toward it. I know that we love our country more than we hate the other side. I know that. When you talk to every individual person, no matter what party they identify with, we're Americans. We love our nation, and we want it to work. But that's not the conversation we've been having. So I'd like to go to Washington because I believe when you get people in a room and you ask them to really own, what do you care about? I care about kids not being hungry. I care about our public school system staying open and not being privatized and going to cyber and charter. I care about young kids being able to work here and not having to go to West Virginia, New York to work on the shallow rigs, right? That's what I care about. People having jobs, people being able to live. We have a terrible underemployment problem here. And these are the folks I see. They come in to me and they're working 22 hours a week at $8.10 an hour, and they have to figure out their daycare issues, and they're struggling. And to me, that's not a one side or the other issue. That's we need to do something better. And with all due respect to our current congressman, he's been there. He'll be going into his 4th term if reelected. Nothing looks better. Nothing looks different for the folks that are on the ground. In Brookville, we have 165 families that rely on our food bank. Our town is 3,800 people. So,
But and around Brookville, it seems like at least Brookville has some industry around the Clarion area with different things that have moved away, the glass plant, and there's a long litany of that stuff. But
yeah.
What would you do to help businesses, industry in the 5th Congressional District?
Well, there's a number of things you can do. And we are so fortunate that we have the education base that we have. I mean, we have the university right down the street. And when you look at the 5th District, there's universities all over the place. We're really very fortunate and rich in the resources we have for education. But we haven't streamlined the need with the resources. So, for example, you go look at any of the parking lots of the hotels up north, and they're filled with cars with Oklahoma plates and Texas plates and so on. So I had to ask, and I found a friend of mine that works in the gas industry and said, why aren't you employing our people? And she was very clear to say they don't know how to work deep rigs. The folks here don't know how to do the deep rig work. When we need to hire a rig hand, we need someone that knows how to do that work. So we end up getting people from Oklahoma, Texas, and so on. And I said, well, how do we teach them, how do we do that? Well, there's places that do, the other states have really intensive VOTEC classes that can teach those kids 2-year program to learn how to do it. And I'm looking at her and I'm saying, well, why didn't we do that? When Marcellus started coming in years ago, you would have thought we would have tied those two things together, but we didn't. And again, it's the silos. The right hand didn't seem to know what the left hand was doing. Sitting on my school board now, I guarantee you we're having a conversation with our VOTEC, trying to catch up, but it's a little late at this point, right? I just sat with a young man who travels to West Virginia for 3 weeks at a time to work on a shallow rig. He lives up in Ridgeway, and he drives, right? I know kids that are going to New York. They want the job. They don't have the skill set to do it. But we have this resource. But again, if the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, if no one's coming down and saying, this is the industry we can bring, we need to train these kids so we're ready. And not even kids. We have an adult population that's underemployed. That when the Sealy plant closed, I know I used to sit at domestics, and there was 5 years ago there was a list of job openings. Right? Whenever you'd go to a support hearing and someone couldn't find a job, you had to prove that you had applied at all these places. That list is gone. It is not a full sheet anymore of the open jobs in this area. And it's not for lack of will. These people want to work. They want to have jobs that pay them well. But we haven't tied all the dots together. And I believe it's the job of our representatives, not only on the state level, but on the federal level, to be the one that's connecting the dots. They're looking at the big picture, or at least they should be, and helping us. It's not for me sitting in my house to wondering about national policy. It's the folks that are doing the national policy that should be putting the pieces in place to get us where we need to be. So,
and one of the hot topics on the federal level is this Keystone Pipeline in terms of distribution of essentially Marcellus product.
I wish it were Marcellus.
Well, yeah, that's right. It's from Canada.
It's tar sands. Yeah. It's a completely different kind of animal. And while a lot of folks will say we've become very good at moving oil through pipeline, we haven't become very good at moving tar sands through pipelines. And the nature of it is you have an abrasive sand that's coated in oil, and it grinds out the seals. And these things leak. And when they leak, it's one of the most difficult things to clean up. So my concern is, we just had a train carrying oil right? Flip here in our area. This isn't, it's a very difficult thing to remedy. And my most significant concern is, what are we going to get for the risk? Right? Marcellus came in and it was sold to us that the risk that you face for your environment is going to be balanced out by jobs, jobs, jobs. That's what we were told, right? That's not quite how that turned out. It was jobs, 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 but not for Pennsylvanians. And I have very significant concerns about the risks to our watersheds. And I know when these rigs go up, men can't hunt anymore because the deer don't go near them because they're too loud and they smell. And, we're doing significant damage to our natural resources. Again, I understand that industry moving forward carries risks. So I'm not one to be an absolutist about anything, but I need to know how big the risk is and what we're getting back for it. And to be honest, from what I've been reading about the risks of the Keystone Pipeline, I can't imagine what we'd get back for it that would make it worth it. It can destroy towns. When the oil sands fall into riverbeds, it actually sinks to the bottom. It's not something that floats on the top that you can skim off. And it's devastating. It's devastating. So that's my concern. It's always about a balance. Mm-hmm. And that's what we should be doing. When we live in extremes, we don't move forward. So it's about finding a balance and weighing risks with benefits. And at this point, I don't know what the benefits would outweigh the risk with the Keystone Pipeline. So,
right. But the transmission of even just the Marcellus, though, would seem to be an important thing because it appears that, transporting it by train presents some risk.
It does. And we have, they're in the process of building a pretty robust pipeline network to move natural gas. And it's generally shallow pipelines. And we haven't had the kind of problems with moving natural gas that we've had with moving oil in the train. Obviously, I know we had the explosion down in Greene County with one of the rigs down there that I know they got capped, but it took 4 days. One person was missing. There are risks that we have to own. If we want to move forward, it does not help any of us to deny the risks or the benefits.
And again, they probably called in people from Texas or Oklahoma to fix it.
To come help fix it. I wouldn't doubt that.
You're listening to Clarion Connection. I'm talking with Kerith Strano Taylor. We're going to take a brief commercial break.
You did your own taxes. Maybe you got a refund. You think your taxes are done. H&R Block has news, America. Last year, $1 billion extra got left behind. Unclaimed by people who did their own taxes and thought they were done. $1 billion of extra money. Waiting for you to take your piece of it. This is your money. Get it back with Block.
At H&R Block, we strive to get you every penny you deserve. In a study of self-prepared tax returns, Block Tax Pros found more money for about 1 in 5 people. Each tax situation is different, and not everyone receives a refund.
Get your billion back, America.
Hello, this is James Porter from your local H&R Block offices in Clarion, New Bethlehem, and Brookville. Come on in to make sure you get your part of the billion.
Good morning.
Why so good?
McDonald's Egg McMuffin sandwiches are 2 for $3.
That is good. It's the one breakfast sandwich that started it all. I like tradition. I like knowing some things never change.
Grilled egg whites and white cheddar cheese, also 2 for $3.
I like that too.
I thought you were a traditionalist.
In a mix it up, try new things sort of way.
Egg McMuffin or Egg White Delight McMuffin sandwiches now 2 for $3. More good mornings to love. Prices and participation may vary. Price of individual item posted on menu board. Limited time offer.
Have you ever wondered why a Coke from McDonald's just seems to taste so good? Maybe it's because it's just $1. Or maybe it's because it takes you back to and makes you think of. And when you pair it with your favorite McDonald's meal, you just feel like saying, Coke and McDonald's go perfectly with any moment. And any size Coca-Cola, soft drink, or sweet tea is $1 at McDonald's. So there's even more happiness to love. A la carte only. Prices and participation may vary. Limited time offer.
Your local station that plays real country. WWCH Clarion. AM.
Welcome back to Clarion Connection. I'm Ron Wilshire. I'm talking with Kerith Strano Taylor today, and she's running for the Democratic nomination for the 5th Congressional District. Kerith, do you want to just go over the background of what it takes to run for Congress. It's not just a matter of saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this."
Wishful thinking. It is not raising your hand and saying, "I think I'd like to do this." It requires 1,000 signatures of registered people from your party. So both the Republican candidate and Democratic candidates have to obtain 1,000 signatures. You have a 3-week window to do that. Our window just opened yesterday, and it continues until March 11th. So there are teams of people going out across our district, which is 24% of the state, covers part of 16 counties. So it's quite a daunting thing to gather those signatures, and then they're submitted to the Department of State in Harrisburg. We've speaking of collaboration and people working together, a really neat thing is happening this weekend. The Northwest Caucus, which is the group of chairs of the Democratic Party in this area, 5 counties have gotten together to do what they're calling the Great Northwest Swing, and it's a petition signing event. So there's going to be 5 locations, and they're bringing in gubernatorial candidates and some of the lieutenant governor candidates, and of course I and my challenger will be present, so that people can come and meet the candidates locally, because a lot of folks, especially for the governor's race, will never have met any of the people that are running. And we recognize that as that's a failure of the system. So they put together this Northwest Swing, and Friday night it's from 7 to 9 in Du Bois at the Fairfield Inn. There'll be a petition signing event. Closer to the folks in Clarion will be Saturday morning. They're doing a piece 8:30 to 10:30 in Ridgeway at the Royal Inn. And from noon to 2 in Brookville at Plyler's Restaurant right on the boulevard. And then in Venango from 3 to 5 at the AFS CME Hall. And then we're ending in Erie from 7 to 9 at the Ambassador Conference Center. So this has never happened before. So we're actually going to have gubernatorial candidates, lieutenant governor candidates, congressional candidates in these places for people to come and meet. And the goal is that we get petitions signed. But it's really about giving people the opportunity to come and poke us and see if we're real and see what we have to say and whether we merit a signature on a petition or their vote come May 20. The important thing to remember is by signing someone's petition, you're not obligated to vote for them. It's not an endorsement in any way, shape, or form. It's simply to get us on the ballot. Because if we don't get the signatures, we don't get on the ballot, and we don't have a shot of doing this thing. So that's the process.
You just have to be a registered voter. And
you have to be a registered voter, and Thompson will be collecting his signatures, so his Republicans will have an opportunity to sign his petition, and Democrats will be signing ours. It's crucial that you fill them out carefully. If you don't fill them out the way that you're registered with the exact address on your registration, it can get stricken. So we encourage people to be conscious of that. Not to belabor the point, but it has to be right. So we encourage people to be aware of it when they're signing.
Are there any other points you'd like to stress in our remaining minutes here of why people should vote for you?
I grew up here. Right, I've lived here my entire life, with the exception of when I was gone for college, and every day I'm amazed by the resources we have and the people we have and the kindness we have. I mean, this morning I saw neighbors cleaning out other people's sidewalks, not because they had to, but because they were out with a shovel and they did it anyway. We have something very special here. We've always been a community, and we take care of our own. What worries me at this point is that's becoming even more difficult because more and more people need more and more help. When we have that many families using the food bank, it makes me realize we have a lot of families that are hungry. Being hungry that's a desperate line, especially when you have kids that don't have the option to go and take care of that themselves. So it all comes down to being engaged in your government. Historically, we haven't had great voter turnout numbers. I think a lot of folks have believed that their vote didn't count, or it was just one opinion. But that's what makes our government great, is when 99% of the people come out and vote. It doesn't much matter what the 1% want. And we have the numbers, and it's about time that we stand up and say we have an opinion and we're going to make it heard. So when I'm traveling across the district, people come up and say to me, Kerith, what are you going to do about that? And I think most important, it's listen to their concerns and then do something about it. It's not enough to just listen. You have to actually translate it into action and do something about it. But I also say to them, I need you to do something about it. If you're not registered to vote, you must register to vote. And if you're registered to vote, you have to find out who the candidates are, see who you like, and then step out on May 20th and vote. Because if people don't vote, how much room do we have to complain about what we get? So I have a real confidence about the folks in the 5th District. I think this is going to be a terrific year. We have the gubernatorial election coming up, and a lot of people have very strong feelings about Corbett, whether for or against, but it's motivating people to be engaged this year. And I can't wait to be able to travel even further. We were in Erie last weekend and Lock Haven last night. My campaign was in State College on Monday night. We're going all over, putting miles on the Ford and just getting from point A to point B to talk to people. So it's going to be an exciting year.
So you like campaigning?
I love it. I love talking to people. I love talking to people. I sometimes am encouraged to not talk as long with people because I could sit and talk for an hour because people have things to say. And they need to believe that something good can come of it and can be done about it. It's not enough just to say, oh, that's tough. What can we do about it? So,
of course, listening's the other end of it, too.
It is. It is. And what's amazing is when you ask, they'll tell you. People will tell you what their struggles are, and they'll tell you what they see as being broken. And it's a matter of picking up and doing. I mean, when I was a kid, my mother used to say to me, you have a minute to complain. And when you're done complaining, tell me what you're going to do about it or stop. And that was the rule in our house. We couldn't lament. There was no lamenting, whether it was relationships or friends or things at school. What are you going to do about it? So when they shut down my government, it looked like a white flag of surrender to me, an admission that they can't do this work. And I believe I can do this work. So this is what I'm going to do about it.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
What are some of the big challenges you see if you got this post?
So, gerrymandering itself has created really safe districts across the nation, which has allowed people to become very polarized and truly really only represent part of their districts, which I believe is the root of the problem that we have in Washington, that people don't have to sit down and negotiate because there's not a risk that they're going to lose their seat. And I understand that on a national level, we don't have much power over the gerrymander or the distribution of the districts because that's done on the state level every decade. But people are starting to, they're changing their mind about how they elect their government. So my hope is that we're going to get a new crop of people in that are going to understand we have to do it better than we've done it before. So the biggest challenge is going to be finding people across the spectrum, independents and Republicans, that we can find that agree on the goal of making our nation a better nation. Because they're there. But a lot of folks are afraid to stand up because there isn't a large enough group to stand up with, saying we can do this better and differently. And I've never had a problem being heard, so I don't mind being the person to stand up and say we can do this differently. There's a lot of really great ideas that Republicans have come up with over the past couple decades, but they've gotten pushed to the wayside by some really extreme positions. And my party's not blameless in that too. We've gotten pushed really extreme positions to the point where we're on polar opposites of the work. So the biggest challenge is going to be finding that group of people that are willing to have an honest conversation about the things that are going on in America. Distance, right? DC is a good haul. It's certainly not as far as for a lot of folks on the West Coast, but figuring out a way to make sure that you're here covering a district that's 24% of the state and making sure that you stay in touch with the constituents. That's a challenge. There are some congressional districts that are a handful of miles across, right? They have all their people in a very tightly knit place. We don't have that luxury. So I have a lot of ideas how to do that. I don't want to give them away yet, but but some really neat ways technology has allowed us to be connected in ways that we never have before. So we have some plans as to how we'd like to do that.
You were talking about Washington and how you were there a long time ago, and people's perception of Washington. When we were talking earlier, I think your young son's perception of Washington, where he would live if you got elected,
so
is telling.
My 6-year-old son believes that when I get elected to Congress, it means that he gets to live at the Washington Zoo. It's one of his favorite places in the world, and every time we go, he gets a new stuffed animal, right? So it is his favorite place. And when I sat down with my kids and my ex-husband and we talked about the idea of doing this thing, that was I get to live at the zoo. And I didn't know how to tell him no. So we're going to ease ourselves into that he doesn't get to live in the panda enclosure. But
metaphorically.
Right? Well, I didn't take it to that level, but you're absolutely right. I am. I'm walking into the jungle. But, D.C. is an interesting place, and it can eat you up, or it can really be the place to spur change. And I'm excited to get there, and I'm excited to get to work for the folks of the 5th District.
Well, great. Thanks for joining us today. Kerith Strano Taylor, Democratic candidate for the nomination for 5th Congressional District on Clarion Connection.
Thank you for having me.